Ladies and gentlemen, the next session is titled "In the New Century." We're starting now. An anthology of Pakistani literature in English, compiled and edited by Muneeza Shamsie. Muneeza Shamsie in conversation with Syra, Vahidy, and Ghazi Salahuddin. Over to you guys.
जी सायरा शुरू करें. Let's.
Is this on? Is this on? Yeah.
Oh, of course.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm not going to make any introduction to Muneeza, because if you're here, you know very well who she is and what she's about. I'd just like to tell you about my interaction with Muneeza. Because I'm pretty much an imposter, I shouldn't be here, and it's only because I pester Muneeza so much that she's got me here. I'm Syra, and I'm the founder of the Zinat Harun Rashid Writing Prize for Women. And when I was setting up this prize, I said, I need some advice about Pakistani writing in English. So I knew that my go-to person was Muneeza. And she very kindly agreed to be on our first judging panel. And since then, she has helped me enormously every year by pointing me in the direction of writers and people I should consider as judges, and opened my eyes to the vast amount of writing of Pakistani literature in English. Many of the writers I didn't know, but I have now familiarized myself with. But Muneeza is really known, I think, from my point of view, Muneeza has done more to make people aware of Pakistani writers than almost the writers themselves, you know. I remember from her very early days as reviewing books in Dawn and interviews with authors, she has raised that awareness in Pakistan of what writing in English is, and on the way has confronted many debates about whether it's valid for Pakistanis to write in English, and things we'll discuss in a minute. But first, I want to just ask you, Muneeza, this book, In the New Century, available now, is an anthology which is a kind of sequel or 20 years after the first anthology of Pakistani writing you published, which was Dragonfly and the Sun. Can you tell me in what ways do you think the writing landscape has changed? What are the salient features in which ways that it has changed?
It's changed completely. I just want to say the ZH Prize is a great initiative, and I'm delighted that you're doing it, and I'm delighted to be here with Mr. Ghazi Salahuddin.
I should have introduced him, sorry.
No.
Who doesn't need an introduction.
Thank you. No. I think on a Sunday afternoon when Karachi is having its brunch, we are talking about literature here, and this anthology is a golden treasury, if you can use the name as a generic name for great anthologies. And I love anthologies. It's so much. I mean, you can open any time. You can refer to an anthology like this and move
Makes
on
you want to read more.
Move on to other works and open the door for you. And so, आपने जो सवाल किया था, आ जाए उस पे.
Well, the landscape has changed drastically. When I did my first anthology, Dragonfly and the Sun, actually there were quite a few writers who had emerged. I mean, 1997, we Nadeem Aslam. Actually, and the other thing is, the internet has also made us aware of prizes all over the world and what's happening in other parts. I mean, people like Nadeem Aslam had won awards in Britain. Nobody really knew. We had a few writers whose work people knew of Bapsi Sidwa. There were sort of debates ranged. Some people thought that Zulfikar wasn't Pakistani because he'd only done one book, and what is this Pakistani writing about Brazil? And then, of course, later academics have turned around and they've seen the incredible Brazilian trilogy as the murder of Aziz Khan on a grander scale. So there are all these kind of links. That's what I mean about links between Pakistan and the diaspora writing. So in 1997, it was also very difficult for Pakistanis to find a publisher. They weren't always Indian English writing at that time had started emerging. People kept saying, but Indian English writing has emerged. Why aren't there any Pakistanis? Actually, thanks to Dawn, who kept shipping me off to do interviews. And my editor, Mr. Siddiqui, found my interest in literature, and he kept saying, there's this person here, go and interview. So it's also thanks to Dawn, but I was interviewing these writers all the time. So I started putting this anthology, but it was the Golden Jubilee. So I did a retrospective, and that brought to mind a lot of older writers whose actually career had begun before Pakistan and who had been like Shahid Surawardi and Ahmad Ali, who were part of the earliest OUP anthologies, the main major anthologies of Pakistani English literature, Pieces of Eight and all Wordfall and all those. But they had already emerged, but there was not enough awareness of it. The big difference between that and this book is that at that time, a lot of these writers had not published full-length books. I mean, Shahid Surawardi and all had. But I was then introduced to people like Tahara Naqvi, Muazzam Sheikh. They were all in America. And they had published very good work in literary journals, but not full-length books, because there was this struggle of finding a publisher. So for that book, I said that I would take writers who had been published. I would only take writers who had been published, but anywhere, but not, it didn't matter if they had written a full-length book or not. Now, of course, and I got, in the end, it was a retrospective done in chronological order, and I got 44 writers of Pakistani origin.
I should mention you have doubled that amount in this anthology.
That was about to say. Now I've got 84. And this time I had to say, well, I will only take authors. And then I had to draw, because everybody kept producing books, I had to make a line as, okay, I'll do that from 1997 to 2017. So I drew a line. Anyone who had published a full-length work by 2017, I would then publish. So I wouldn't take people who'd published in literary journals but had not done a full-length work, because I had to restrict now. And then I had to say, well, please try and restrict it to 1,000 words if you can. It didn't quite always work like that, because there were certain pieces which I felt were important and which were slightly longer, but I had to restrict the length. In the first one, in Dragonfly in the Sun, when I took published books, I actually used extracts from this, there were 3 or 4 extracts from the book. Yeah, I couldn't possibly do that. The other thing I changed here was in Dragonfly in the Sun, I had used extracts from plays, dramas. And again, if people had done 3 different genres, they'd done plays, fiction, poetry, I included all 3. This time, again, I had to restrict myself. So I restricted myself to, if they had done prose and fiction. So if they had done prose and poetry, then I put both forms in. But for drama, I thought it would be, instead of doing, 1,000 words of drama, you really don't get anything. I thought, well, let's use memoir essays. And I found all of them had written these fascinating, like Ayub Khan Deen, who's a famous British Pakistani poet. He's done an essay, The Play I Almost Didn't Write. We have one playwright who's getting Usman Ali in Pakistan. He wrote about how his play evolved. So Rukhsana Ahmad, who's in Britain, she wrote about how her plays, how you approached it, how you had to cope with not many people being interested, the formation of new drama groups. Then I use, of course, life writing like Syra and all that.
Would it be correct to say that that in the first anthology there was a lot? I mean, there weren't that many prose writers. It was
Yes.
more geared to poetry, and in this anthology you have got a lot more prose, both fiction and non-fiction.
Well, yes, in those days, I mean, Pakistani English literature really began with poetry. That's how it took off. I mean, we had Ahmed Ali, but you had, with the new voices were used, Tawfiq Rafat, Adrian Hussain, Salman Qureshi, some of whom are here and floating around this, not in this particular audience, but in the KLF today. And there was a great deal of poetry activity. I'm not sure why fiction wasn't. There was a lot of fiction being written, but it wasn't modern. They used an old-fashioned, and what this new generation, this Tawfiq Rafat and Adrian Hussain, they've introduced a new voice, a new modern voice, a new contemporary voice. And then suddenly about 1980, it sort of starts changing. And again, it's all got to do, a lot of it, with who was willing to publish you. Babsi was among the first. I mean, Zulfikar Ghaus actually was quite a pioneer because he was in England and he started writing, I think in the 60s, early 60s. And one of the problems in Pakistani English writing is how to convey the experience of your world into English. I just use a simple sentence always because I think if in Urdu you read, Ladki ne jhukkar adab kiya, you've got her culture, you've got her provincial origin, you've got what she's all about. What do you say in English? She bowed. Well, she bowed. She raised her hand to her forehead. What does that mean? So to convey that simple sentence into English and to get an English-speaking audience to relate to it, that's a huge challenge.
That is the main issue here. This book certifies the growth and the sudden, in this anthology, you have more writers than in a shorter period than you had in the previous anthology, which covered a larger time period.
Yes.
And as you say, does this literature that's being produced, is it the main creative expression of the Pakistani society? And how does it compare with the kind of creativity that we see in Urdu and other languages? Is there some way to have a measure of what the English writings are doing and how? And the other question that would emerge from here is, how would you compare the writing that's done by writers who belong to the diaspora and the ones who live here? And
well, it's a terribly complicated question. For one thing, I wish I was sufficiently acquainted with the other languages to make a comparison between that and English. I can only speak really of how English has developed. What I think is terribly important is translations. I don't know why we don't do more translations. We should be translating, but there has been a lot more translation of Urdu and Sindhi in our own languages into English now, and now, for example, you get the main international prizes, they will include translations. They don't just stick to Anglophone writing. But we really do need to translate English work much more into Urdu. And instead of, I had said earlier, one of the things was, this is a writing about the elite. Well, because these are only elite people. Well, people from different worlds now do actually use, in the diaspora, it is not the privilege or the profession. You've got a working class literature written in English by people who are working class and who write that about that world. But even in Urdu, I mean, if somebody's from an elite organization, ambience or what, you don't say he doesn't count for anything because he's elite. If you look at their writing, what is it worth? What is he saying?
I mean, just on the question of language, I know that my own experience of reading, I was always worried about reading Pakistani literature in English because I said they can't get the dialogue right, the fiction, because that's not the way we speak. And then a certain book in 1981 changed all that for me. And the nativization of English and creating that idiom where popular culture and popular phrases could be incorporated into English. And today, I think somebody like Moni Mohsin, who you've included in this anthology, does it brilliantly with her Social Butterfly, which is literal translations of Urdu phrases into English. But that is, I think, also what inspired a lot of writers in Pakistani writers in English.
Well, I mean, it's not just that. I think it's just a genre that has developed. You find publishers. Well, there are two questions. I wanted to go back to the diaspora and what is written in Pakistan. And let me just answer this publishing thing. The very interesting thing, I mean, I've noticed when you're judging a prize for an international jury, it's very interesting when you find, say, a European judge who will say, oh, this is a tremendously good book about some South Asian. And me and the fellow Desi will scream and say, no, it's awful. And the same with feminist writing, with women's writing, you often find women judges will say, oh, we think this is a good book. And the men will say, oh, we don't think it's special, or vice versa. So these kind of things also play a role in what works for a publisher. And one of the things that happened, I think, was not only was Pakistani writing started being published abroad and drawing attention, but you had a very vital publishing industry in India, and they started picking up a lot of authors. And then it sort of grew, and now we have got our own publishing industry. We're publishing a lot of work. Going back to the diaspora question.
No. There's something that I noted, that Indian writers, writers of fiction, the major ones, have sort of, I find, more references to Urdu literature in their writings than in the writings of Pakistani writers in English. And then, of course, Vikram Seth has translated Ghalib's letters in verse.
I didn't know that.
In The White Tiger, there is all reference to Urdu poetry. In Custody is all about...
yes, that is. Yes.
So, how do you see it? I mean, the great sort of, the kind of impact that Urdu poetry has on our society, and then how it's part of how people express themselves. Why do the Indian writers have done it better than Pakistani writers?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's a kind of different issue here. One of them is that what a lot of, in poetry, there's a lot of work, interesting work going on in poetry. With Kamla's professor, Shahid Ali, who gave us a new, who knew...
इन्होंने तो फैज को याद किया बहुत, लेकिन...
Look, he wrote ghazals in English. I mean, other people had tried. By the way, they've all tried, from the, even from Shahid Suravardi, and they all tried to write somehow. They were very conscious of the ghazal. I'm going back to poetry. And you've got all these early writers trying to write ghazals in English, but they don't use the format. They try to play around with it. Shahid Ali, I think, did an enormous work on that, and he wrote the couplets. Not only did he write couplets, but he actually instructed his pupils how to write ghazals. And then ghazals, you start finding American poets writing ghazals. But among our poets, I mean, you've got Shadab Zish Hashmi. She's done a lot of work on writing ghazals. She's developed qasidas. Athar Tahir has written a poem called the Andalusian Qasida, which was because, you know, in Muslim Spain, the ghazal and the qasida were very much a part of the literary format, because in the Arab Muslim culture. And then what you have is that then you get the expulsion of the Moors from Spain, and then they wipe it all out. And so you've got them explore. There's one poet here. He has written a format. I think they've tried to write marsias. So you've got this kind of technicality,
Yes.
trying to transmute that into English. I don't know about the engagement with Urdu in. I think some of them engage.
There are references in your anthology. For instance, about Sara Suleri quoting Momin's couplet, "Tum mere paas hote ho goya, jab koi dusra nahi hota," and she has translated in a certain way. And there is another reference in a poetry in which there is Urdu poetry,
Yes,
straight, plain, pure Urdu poetry with in the midst of the English.
yes, that was wonderful. That was Hima Raza, the late Hima Raza, who sadly died so young. She's written, one poem is called Us in Two Tones, which I've got here. So half of it is in English, and then it ends with, and another voice emerges. And I think the next line is Kaun Majnu Kaun Naila, isn't it? Anyway, and she then goes into all these lines into Urdu, and then she reverts into English. And then she's got another poem, which I've also put in, which is called Us in Translation. And so she's got half a poem in English, and then she moves into Urdu. So you do have a lot more input, but even in English, you do get people engaging with Urdu literature, engaging with. I think they do it quite a lot.
But it would be difficult for a writer writing in English to depict a certain cultural environment. For instance, let me give the example of Atiya Hussein's Sunlight on a Broken Column. It's about a culture, the decaying North India, Lucknow.
Yes,
That novel was translated by Intizar Hussain.
I know.
And that translation seemed to be the original one,
I know.
rather than.
Well, you know, I mean, I actually ran into him. I was meeting and he turned around to me and he said, मैंने ये किताब पढ़ी और मैंने सोचा, अरे इसको तो उर्दू में होना चाहिए, तो मैंने उर्दू में तर्जुमा कर दिया.
Yes, and let me, I mean, it may not be relevant to this thing. Let me also refer to Dozakhnama. Dozakhnama was written in Bengali, translated into English, and then translated into Urdu. And the Urdu version appears to be the original one. But here is a Hindu Bengali writing about Ghalib and Manto, and then with entire kind of reference to Manto's stories and Ghalib's letters. Extremely impressive research, and then no Pakistani writer in English has mined that.
No, I don't think that's quite fair because they have. Well, actually, Kamla's blinking at me. But
we have two persons here who are in this book.
But she did actually. I mean, I'm just mentioning her en passant. But she did actually incorporate an Urdu script into one of her novels. But actually, one of the things I've discovered among Pakistani writers is that a lot of them are actually multilingual or bilingual, and they write in both languages. Haris writes in Punjabi, Urdu, and English.
Pirzada Salman is here.
Yes,
he's in this
absolutely.
anthology.
He
And-
does, absolutely.
And he writes in both languages.
And he's in the book.
Yes.
Can I just get back to the book actually and what's in it, because I think people would like to know, because I found, I came across authors I was not familiar with.
But can I just stop? I just want to mention some other people who are translators. There's Tahira Naqvi, who's a very famous translator. There's Muazzam Sheikh, who translate. There are lots of English language writers. Muhammad Hanif translates. He's also bi or trilingual. So we've got a movement between
Yes.
languages, certainly. But anyway, let's go back to
No, I just wanted to say we should talk a little bit about what's actually in the book.
Okay.
Because that's what I think will make people really want to read it and buy it. And every school should have it, every college should have it as a reference.
नहीं, जब हम बातें करते हैं, it's meant to be a conversation.
Yes.
And so we can sort of...
No, but I did want to talk about, because there's some such spectacular pieces of writing in
Yes,
this book, and I'd like to just mention, and this goes back to diaspora writing as well, and because I just did a quick calculation that of the prose pieces in this book, 28 pieces are not set in Pakistan, and 31 are set in Pakistan.
Oh, okay.
And I was just wanting to talk about the question of resonance of Pakistani readership with diaspora writing and with writing writing stories set in Pakistan. This is of prose I'm talking now. And for me, there are so many pieces that speak to me so directly, which have so much resonance, especially there are 3 stories that come to mind immediately, which are set in Karachi, because I'm a Karachiite. I mean, Umar Shahid Hamid writes in Karachi. Akila Ismail has written a brilliant piece called These Are the Streets Where We Died, about the assassination of her sister in Orangi. And Bilal Tanveer writes about the bomb at Kant Station. So these are things that we can understand and write as a native Pakistani readership. Do you think that diaspora writing has the same kind of resonance for a readership here?
Well, I mean, frankly, these days it's not always easy to define who's diaspora and who's not, to start off with, because everybody's traveling. You have people who grew up in...
No, stories that are set in Pakistan than those that are not set in Pakistan.
Well, I don't, you see, I've never seen literature in this way. I mean, I know literature was about rediscovering, it was my engagement in literature was in a way personal, discovering oneself. But to me, literature has made me discover other worlds. And if you write about Pakistanis living abroad and they write their own experience, how does that not relate to you? I don't understand. Because now we're all dispersed.
बिल्कुल, it does relate to us.
We've all got children or relatives who are living abroad. Some of those experiences are often not expressed.
Yes, I should mention that Kamila's piece has a lot of resonance, which is about being grilled by an immigration officer. It's from Home Fire, I think.
Yes.
And it's has a lot of resonance for anybody who travels between the two countries.
No, well, it's not just that. It's not just that resonance. It is an experience. And the other thing that they say is about diaspora writing. I mean, supposing you've got someone completely diaspora. The criticism I often get is, why do you include Hanif Qureshi, who says because he's, in fact, even when I interviewed him, he said, I am an Englishman, which he is. But then he's got Umar Qureshi as his chacha, he's got his father, Rafiul Shah, who works in the Pakistan High Commission, and he incorporates all this into his work. So how can you separate, not all his work, but some of his work? He quotes Marquis's poems. He has and it is a very integral part of him.
No,
So I think you need to understand this complexity rather than focus on what is here and what is there. I think it's...
No, but when you speak of Hanif Qureshi being here and the questions that could have been raised, how about Homeland Elegies? That Zahid Akhtar? Ayaz, eh?
Ayaz Akhtar, yes.
Ayaz Akhtar. Shouldn't he have been here in this?
I expect, there are people who should or should not have been there.
Because Homeland Elegies is it's remarkable.
No. Now, I can't remember, quite honestly, working on these 84 things. But I tell you, I approached practically everybody and I wrote to everybody.
Yes.
Some people are not in this book because there were issues of copyright, or they were not interested, or they were not pushed. So now I don't know which category Ayad Akhtar comes into, because I haven't really thought about who was and who was. I just went ahead with those who agreed, with whom the copyright worked and all that. But Ayad Akhtar is very important. He's won the Pulitzer Prize. He's the first Pakistani to do so.
Yes.
For his plays. So he has done some very interesting work. I wouldn't
Isn't he
exclude-
after 2017 though? Because you only go up to 2017.
Yes, I'm sure he published work
And
before
then his
that.
play won the Pulitzer Prize.
I don't know.
Yes.
He would have published a full-length drama, I'm sure, before 2017. But I haven't got him here, and I'm sorry to say I'm not entirely sure why. But there would have been some issue.
But these are difficult decisions, all
No,
right,
they're
yes.
not particularly difficult decision. I reach out to anybody who is of Pakistani origin, wherever they live. We've got, hardly anyone has heard of Wayne Ashton. Wayne Ashton, actually his family belongs to Karachi's. I think he took on his stepfather's name, became Ashton. I think definitely his book is dedicated to the Azam family, which is very much here. And he writes about East Pakistan, which no one else has. I mean, before it sort of became 1971.
Yes. It's set in Chittagong.
Ah,
His story,
Set in
his
Chittagong.
story is
The story, the tandoori story, yes.
about a
That's
70
something I
it's-
think you mentioned
as-
those books and
Yes.
stories that have taken up 47, 71. I don't think Urdu writings have that kind of reference. I am not aware of Urdu creative writing being so attending to these great subjects, great themes.
I would have thought there would be.
Yes.
But again, I don't want to go leaping into something I don't know.
There are two stories set in East Pakistan. I think one is Durdana Sumro and her sisters.
That Durdana has also done.
Visit
that-
of Ayub Khan to
Yes,
to
that's
East
right.
Pakistan. And the other one is Wayne Ashton, which is a lovely story about a
Nadeem
17-year-old
Aslam has,
cook who invents a tandoor, and his invention is stolen by
That's right. That's a lovely story.
one of the industrialists who visits the home of the person he works
That's
for.
right. Yes, right. No, we. Well, I mean, I'm really happy that a lot of the. I'm really happy that Salman is here actually with us, because he has written about something.
we have two. I mean, Kamila and Salman. Is there
No,
any other person who is in the book is present here? No.
No, but Salman has written about nuclear war, and that is something we
That's
need to
something,
think
yes.
about also, and not many people have. And I thought that was a really important poems that I have.
Is there something different in the writings of those who write bilingually, write in both languages?
No, I don't find something different as
Yes.
in some. Well, I mean, for example, we've got Musharraf Ali Farooqi.
Yes.
Now he he's sort of, rather than he's
He does
translated
bring
Mr. Afzal,
a
hasn't he?
certain.
Musharraf has translated your work.
Musharraf-
And he writes in both
Musharraf
languages.
Parsi.
But he's translated you also, hasn't he? Rococo and his brothers. It's a wonderful piece of work. But he's moving things. He does dastans, and he's doing dastans in English. And not only does he translated
Amir Hamza.
Amir Hamza and so on, but he's actually written a dastan in English based on these forms. What he's got here is a piece from his novel called Clay and Dust, which he uses the old, two old-fashioned people. One is a wrestler and one is a courtesan, and the kind of culture to which they belong, and how that kind of has changed, and it becomes commercial and different. And whereas in the old world, it was a different, courteous, sort of more respected culture. And so you get this kind of intersection in quite a lot of work. Some people, I wish someone, well, I wish actually Salman is also here because he writes in English and in Urdu. And sometimes I have been told, not by him, but somebody else, that because Urdu has certain restrictions that you must write like this, he found English was more liberating. Some people, maybe it works conversely, that English has certain rules that you find more liberating. You don't have to use in Urdu or Punjabi or any other language or Pashto. I don't know. These are very complex issues.
It is. No, there are some writers who were initially writing in English and they also then started writing in Urdu. And there are others who initially were writing in Urdu and then shifted to the example of Amir.
Amir, yes, Amir.
Yes, and there are others who were.
Well, yes, Amir, well, that's an interesting diaspora tale.
Yes.
Because he goes to England from here, English medium.
And then suddenly this urge, this desire to.
He learns Urdu,
Yes.
and then I've forgotten to encourage him, he's then encouraged. Why don't you start right? Because he knows a little Urdu, and then he starts writing in Urdu. And then the other interesting thing he does is he transmutes or translates his Urdu stories into English. And that there are kind of subtle differences. That was the Babsi Sitwa story here, incidentally, is about turning her film, Ice Candy Man, turning my novel into a film. And again, when it's being filmed, she's saying, but why haven't you got this? And why haven't you got that? And she's told, no, in a film it doesn't work. And so this transmutation, again, from one medium to another, of what you leave out, of what you put in, and what you add. Now, when she did Water, which was originally Deepa Mehta's film, which is very rare, usually novels are turned into film, but she turns a film into a novel. And then she adds a whole lot of details into it. Although the piece I've used is about transmuting Ice Candy Man into Earth. And I was just talking about, so I've tried to use a different kind of stories and life writing. Tariq Ali, it's kind of an essay actually, rather than a sort of person. It's Cervantes and our time, his time and ours, and how about changing worlds and adjusting to, and he's written about, it's personal and it's not personal. I've also expanded that because life writing now expands, it includes newspaper columns, it's sort of expanded just from being a memoir or autobiography. And Zulfikar Ghaus writes about contemplating butterflies and what that evokes, and then it evokes literature and Shakespeare and so on, and then his novel.
Yes. No, I was wondering, because this is the launching of this book also, if it were possible to have some readings from it, and only poetry could be
Yes, why
read.
not?
If
We could
Yeah,
roll
ju-
right-
you would select
I just
something.
wanted to mention a few of the stories in the book because just to
Yes.
encourage you to go out and check them out
Haan,
and
nahi, nahi.
what they're about. And I'm talking about a fiction here, so or not life writing as well, but some of the stories that you made. I mean, for example, Sabine Javeri has written a story called The Letter, which is about changing times in rural Punjab, and it captures the poverty and powerlessness about a man who receives a letter saying he has to move out of his home because his brothers sold it, and the army is taking it over as a place to put some barracks. Shazaf Fatima has written a very funny story called How Harun Tied the Knot. And her use of language is again very interesting because she uses a lot of Pakistani idiom in it. But the one I'd like to do a reading from, if you don't mind, again, as I said, the Karachi ones that speak to me, is a piece from
अच्छा आपने तो वो हाईलाइट किए हुए हैं कुछ पैसेजेस,
हाँ मैंने तो की हुई है
तो आप पढ़ के सुनाएंगे.
थोड़ा सा अगर
I
आप
know.
इजाजत दें only because it's so powerful. This is from Bilal Tanveer writing
Yes.
about the bomb in Kant Station. Now again, this is why I was talking about resonance. He said, I was feeling a disconnect with my body, which was beating to a different, much slower rhythm than my mind. Somebody at the hospital said that the bomb went off just outside the station, at the intersection. In my mind, I was seeing that triangular intersection where at this time of day, the traffic locked into each other because one lane was blocked by buses that treated it as a 5-minute stop. The buildings around the intersection were marked with permanent cracks and showed how this city had aged over the decades, having withstood the incessant assault of noise, smoke, and dust. My mind drifted. I was dreaming of the cafe at Kant Station where I went looking for an old man. It was a Persian cafe that served cheap food and tea and fruit cakes. Its dark hall was packed with booths that had wooden furniture and tables with marble tops.
I think
Just one last bit from here. Out on the street, I saw a boy with a car with a girl stuck in a traffic jam. These stories, I realized, were lost. Nobody was going to know that part of the city but as a place where the bomb went off. The bomb was going to become the story of this city. That's how we lose the city. That's how our knowledge of what the world is and how it functions is taken away from us. When what we know is blasted into rubble and what is created in its place bears no resemblance to what there was, and we are left strangers in a place we knew that we ought to have known.
मेरे ख्याल में शायरी जो है ना, पोइट्री, वो कोई रिसाइट कर सके इसमें से selected. Would you suggest something that is very striking, because ताकि हम जो हमारे लोग बैठे हैं इनको तो engage करें ना.
Oh, something, well,
हाँ
I've got quite a lot.
हाँ.
you want me to
Who
read
will read it? You suggest somebody.
Would anyone volunteer to read anything?
नहीं you.
Huh?
Why don't you read it, Muneeza?
Well, I had one, actually, I mean, this is a...
नहीं, इन दोनों में से किसी को बुलाती, इनको. She will. Okay. Let's have some poems from this anthology, and I get the feeling that the quality of poetry in English has greatly improved. It is very, very.
I'm going to actually... what not to say. I'm going to read a couple.
I think some of the poets are writing.
Well, the mom's not here, otherwise we could have got him to read it. One night.
us.
Okay. I'm going to start actually with Tawfiq Rafat, who was such.
Tawfiq Rafat.
Oh, I'm going to start with.
हाँ.
No, I've lost the page. Oh,
How much time do we
आपको थोड़ा सा U-turn करना पड़ेगा.
need some Just 3 minutes.
15
Or 15
क्या?
minutes. So I'll do a.
कितने?
15 minutes.
I'm sorry, I've just lost.
That's a lot.
I've lost the page.
हाँ.
I was going to read Tawfiq Rafat.
Should we just ask if there are anybody?
No, wait a minute, I'll just find it for you. Page 1. Oh, here's page 1. There we are. Well, this is page 1. I mean, this is Tawfiq Rafat. He was the great pioneer, and it's actually, I thought I'd read it to you because it's called Karachi 79.
Yes.
A strange love affair between the city and me. I can't stand it for more than a few days at a time. Yet, every 10 years or so, it extracts its poem. Taller and taller, its buildings are getting, and its citizens smaller and smaller, and the blotches of greenery spreading like a rash. The year I've brought my weather with me, rain and plenty of it, my relatives here have had to be evacuated by a naval boat. When they planned this city, they forgot the sewers, or it was never planned. House was added to house, and street to street, till it got out of hand. Well, here it is, and here I am, circling each other again. The question is, who's going to get to spit first in the other's eye?
Very good. Another one.
I was going to throw open the questions, but if you have another reading, please.
No, there's just
No,
one
no.
more,
Let's
which
have another.
I want
poem
to move
after
because
that.
this is slightly longer, but it's this is Imtiaz Dharkar. I'm going to,
Oh yes.
who has again a multiple kind of identity because she was born in Lahore, she grew up in Glasgow, then married an Indian, then came back to India, married a Welshman who sadly died. And this is from after it's called Tal. This music will not sit in straight lines. The notes refuse to perch on wires, but move in rhythm with the dancer round the face of the clock to the dandelion head of time. We feel blown free, but circle back to be in love, to touch and part, and meet again, spun past the face of the moon, the precise underpinning of the stars. The cycle begins with one and ends with one. Da, din, din, da. There must be other feet in step with us, an underbeat, a voice that keeps count, not yours or mine. The music is playing on. We are playing with time.
Wow.
She's the first South Asian to have won the Queen's Medal for Poetry in England. She's a really remarkable writer. Oh yes, open to the.
I was thinking, let's open the question. We have somebody in the front row here.
Oh no, good. Yes.
Any mics? Can we have a mic here in the front row?
Idhar.
I just wanted to add to the topic of translation.
Yeah.
Because, can you hear me?
It's not on.
It is on.
Okay.
So, you were talking about translation of the English work into Urdu. So, I think the reason we see
I'm sorry, I
more
can't hear. Translation of?
English literature in Pakistan into Urdu, I think that's what you were talking about
Yes,
earlier,
yes.
right? So, I would want to bring to your attention the need to translate the provincial fiction in Sindhi, Punjabi, so on, into English to add to the English literature. Because I see that coming from India. A case in point being the book Khachar Gochar, by Vivek Shambhak. So it's been translated from Kannada language into English, and that's how we got to read it. So, if we could do that here, I don't think fiction writing in Sindhi and other provincial languages is being translated into English. And if it is, do you know about it? I mean, is it in your knowledge?
There's a piece in this book about I think is it Mohenjo-daro, which is oh no, the one about the
Mars?
Mithai.
Yes. Bulle Shah.
Bulle Shah or Mithai, I think there's one.
That's Bulle, but that's not a translation.
No,
They're
it's not a
translations, they're
translation. No,
originals.
it's not. The original
Yes,
stories.
on Bulle Shah, on
Yeah.
Mohenjo-daro.
See, that's
No,
a
no,
poem.
the question was, shouldn't we be looking at the regional languages also? But
Well, they have.
no, the Indian situation is very different. The literature that's being produced in India's regional languages is great. I mean, if you look at the main playwrights of India who have made global kind of impact, like Girish Karnad, like Tendulkar, they originally have written in Kannada, in Marathi, in Bengali. So we don't have that kind of literary flourish in our regional language, except in Sindhi. Sindhi is one language that
No, there's a lot of translation happening. It has changed. Actually, one of the, I actually think of translations as a creative work. One of the things I had to, when I was doing this book, was to go, should I include translations, or at least include translations by the writers I've included in this book. But I decided that, well, I mean, it is, it's got 84 writers without translations, and I just didn't have the space. But it is in all international languages, all the major prizes, they now include translations. And we have got a fair amount. I mean, I'm actually somebody, I have, because I read quite a lot of translations, at least in Urdu I have seen quite a lot. And I really don't know so much about other languages, but there is a definite trend, and it is happening. In the translation of poetry, I have to say, one of the things I like is to have the original script alongside the English. In India, because hardly anyone reads Urdu anymore, they're doing a lot of work and translate. They've done a lot of books. I was reading in fact, I reviewed a wonderful book on Mir called The Hidden Garden. But I think that was the book. But what they do is that they use Romanized Urdu, which I find very difficult. It's very nice when you can read the original with the translation. You can do it in poetry. I think with a novel or fiction, it would get very difficult. But I mean, all these people have been translated, like Intizar Hussain, Abdullah Hussain, he translated himself, Qurratan Heather, Ismat Chughtai, Mir, I mean, Ghalib, they're all translated. I'm sorry, I can only talk about Urdu because it was my mother's language. Technically, it's my mother tongue, but I got caught up in my father's language.
We have another question.
yeah.
Hi. So Muneeza, I'm from a business background, so I will apologize for some maybe unworthy questions for this very qualified audience. Of all the works that you have done, your contribution, if you must choose one that somebody should read, which one would that be? And if I may complete my question. And in the same vein, if you must choose 2 or 3 books of Pakistani authors, which one those would be? And I know I'm putting you in a
Listen, I have often been asked my favorite author, and my answer is completely nepotistic. I love best the books written by members of my family. It's not just one, but a lot. I mean, those are the best books. Read them all.
Good answer. We have a question here.
Yeah.
Ji.
First of all, regarding the translations, you mentioned very well, and the point well taken by the audience, that how the translations are growing in our country. But I think burdening a writer like you with the translations, I think this is expecting much, much more from an original writer, because a person who is translating must understand the nuances of socio-cultural aspects of the original works. If he or she knows the original nuances and the original connotations and implications of the work, only then he or she will be able to translate that work in another language. And that then again comes the ultimate and the good grasp of that, both the languages the writer is doing justice to. Secondly, I just want to appreciate your contribution to the Pakistani English literature and writing so much about English in Pakistan. And I just want also to appreciate as a brother, because beneath a large banyan tree, a small, plants can't grow. But your legacy is very, very strong. And I've read Kamila a lot, and I've come to the conclusion that her rise in her own right beneath you is a credit that you must also take, and you should be proud of as a mother and as a writer as well. Thank you very much.
I just want to quickly interject to say there are no translations in this.
No, I understand. I understand. I was actually talking to the point taken and the discussion that was going on.
Hello, I want to know that what was the process of selecting all these poets and authors you included in your book? Did you mention it? Did you consult any certain publishers, or what was the main process of selecting all these authors? Or did you know them already, that they have written in English and they have written very good and they were famous? Is it the process, or did you consult someone about it?
No, I didn't consult anyone. You see, I've been working in this. Before this, I had done a literary history called Hybrid Tapestries, the development of Pakistani English literature. And every year I also do, for the Journal of Commonwealth Literature, I do which changes names, Literature, Critique and Empire today. But anyway, every year I do a bibliography of writing in Pakistani. So that includes translation, poetry, fiction. I do an essay. So a lot of the books happen to come my way because of this, both because of, and so I did know. I mean, when you're looking out for something like this, then you obviously discover new things, new writers suddenly pop up, or you find, oh goodness, I didn't know that this work had happened. But the process actually was me writing to people saying, please, can you contribute? Sometimes me seeing a piece and saying, oh, this is a piece I'd like to contribute. And then with OUP would then negotiate the copyrights and so on. Some people didn't, as I said, some people didn't answer. And so, one couldn't do anything. Some people, there were copyright issues. But the basic process was approaching people directly, or just sending out a letter saying, I'm interested in this, if you know anyone. But basically, I included writers that I felt were of a literary quality. I did try to keep it to that, rather than people who had published inadequate, what are books are considered inadequate, or, not so good. So I have tried, and so I managed to get 84 writers who write great books.
There's a question. Mike?
My fondest regards to both of the great writers, and we appreciate your work. Ma'am, I would like to ask one question from you and the other from Sir Salahuddin. Ma'am, while compiling up your new anthology, did you notice any change in the traits of hegemony and mimicry can we say that is there any special element that can be compared with the writers of the modern era and from the writers of the post-modern era or post-postmodern era? Do you have any comment on this thing?
On the changes between,
Yeah.
well, no, obviously there's been a lot of change. I mean, the books, the writers I have are only from 1997 to 2017. So that they are all belong to this era. Then I haven't got any sort of pre-modern. One of the things that, by the way, has changed because Pakistani English writing started to get published, was you've actually got, I've organized this chronologically according to age. And the interesting thing where you find that is that writers who perhaps belong to an older generation have only published their works comparatively recently. People like Irshad Abdul Qadir, Saad Ashraf. But what is again interesting is their approach, the way they approach what engages them, and that kind of places them in a kind of generation. It's quite an interesting trend. So you suddenly get older writers writing now, and they probably had been sitting on those works for ages. You know that.
Okay,
My other question is from Sir Salahuddin. Sir, why?
But I don't think.
No, it would just be a commentary for our knowledge that, sir, you must have noticed that the tinge of satire is getting intense day by day, both in Urdu literature and in the English literature, or some pieces translated into English. Sir, can you please comment on that?
No, I wouldn't, because the stage belongs to.
And I just,
Muneeza.
before we
Yes.
finally this thing, I wondered if Kamala had any comment.
No, but do we have time? I'll. नहीं, मैं आपसे बात कर लेंगे फिर अभी, लेकिन इनफैक्ट our time is over.
Yes.
It is. But to conclude, this is a great work that Muneeza has done. It's really, and it's a pleasure to go through its pages, and I think we must all pay compliments
Thank you so much.
to you for doing this, and
Yeah. Certainly opened my eyes to a lot of
Thank you
authors.
both so